Hi, dear students. Today we are going to study a new chapter that is experiments with water. In this chapter, we are going to learn some special features of water and the reason why objects are floating and sinking in water. Let us see. In the beginning of the chapter, we can see a poem in which a boy asks a lot of questions that arise in his mind. Listen, all of you. Why, oh why? A wooden boat in water will float, but a needle will sink. Why does this happen? Let me think. An iron ship will also float, though it's much heavier than my boat. But a needle, light as a leaf, thin as a pin, will sink right in. Why does this happen? Let me think. We can find answers for all these questions. First of all, we have to learn what is buoyant force. Okay? Buoyant force. Buoyant force is an upward thrust exerted by a fluid that opposes the weight of a partially or fully immersed object. The buoyant force always points upwards because the pressure of a fluid increases with depth. Listen. It is an upward force produced by the liquid. When we put an object in water, this force will push the object upwards so that object floats in water. Okay? Now let us see how object float in water. When the buoyant force is more than the weight of an object, the object will float. If the buoyant force is more than the weight of the object, then the object will float in water. Example, a wooden boat has less weight than the buoyant force exerted by water. Now let us see how objects sink in water. When weight of an object is more than the buoyant force, the object will sink. If the weight of the object is more than the buoyant force, then that object will sink. Example, a piece of rock sinks in a glass of water because the weight of the rock is more than the buoyant force exerted by the water in the glass. Okay? In that poem, we have seen a question that is, an iron ship floats but an iron needle sinks. Why? Let us see the reason for this. Floating and sinking of an object also depends on the area of the object. When area of the object is more, buoyant force exerted by the liquid will be more. So a ship has more area can displace more water than its weight. So it floats in water. In this picture, you can see that the area of the ship under the water is more. Therefore, it can displace more water than its weight. So it floats in water. Clear? But a needle sinks because the area of the needle is small and weight of the needle is more than the buoyant force exerted by the liquid. But you know that the area of the needle is very small. So its weight is more than the buoyant force exerted by the liquid. So it sinks in water. Okay. Now let us see the magic of salt water. Here you can see the egg is at the bottom of the glass in the fresh water, but it reached on the top of the glass in salt water. What is the reason for this? Let us see. The egg will sink in the fresh water because it has greater density than the water. The egg will float in the salt water because when salt is added to water, its density becomes greater than that of the egg. What is when we add salt to the fresh water, its density, otherwise thickness, will increase. So the density of the water will become more than the weight of the egg. So it floats in the salt water. Okay. Now let us see the concepts of Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is too salty, 300 grams of salt per liter of water. So the density of the water is more and it gives an ideal condition for an object to float. A person can easily float on Dead Sea. Do you know the taste of seawater? It has the taste of salt. But in Dead Sea, the content of salt is more, that is 300 gram per liter of water. So the density of the water is more in Dead Sea. That is why a person can easily float on this Dead Sea. Okay. Do you know how salt is made? Let us see. The seawater is collected in shallow beds dug in the sand. Water is allowed to dry in the sun. After the water dries, the salt remains on the ground. Listen, near seashore, the seawater is collected in shallow beds, which is made by digging in the sand. Then this water will be allowed to dry in the sunlight. After drying the complete water, the salt will remain on the ground. This salt will purify and use for our day-to-day life. Okay. Next, we are going to learn a historic event which is connected with salt in our freedom struggle. That is Dandi March. In 1930, before India became independent, the British government made a law that did not allow people to make salt themselves. They had also put a heavy tax on salt. By this law, people could not make salt even for use at home. So Gandhiji and other people went on a yatra, a long walk from Ahmedabad to the Dandi seashore in Gujarat to protest against this law. We know that before our independence, we were ruled by the British government. They made a lot of law to trouble our Indian farmers. In 1930, British government made a law in that people are not allowed to make salt by themselves. They had put heavy tax on salt, so people could not make salt even for their own use at home. Gandhiji heard about this law. He could not agree with this law. So Gandhiji called all the people together and went on a long walk from Ahmedabad to the Dandi seashore in Gujarat to protest against this law. This long walk was known as Dandi March. Okay. Okay, students. Now you have learned a lot of points based on this chapter. Let me check how much you have learned from this class. So, do the given question as homework and send your answers to my personal number today itself. Fill in the blanks. Question number 1. Dash is an upward thrust exerted by a fluid that opposes the weight of an object. Number 2. The egg will sink in fresh water because it has greater dash than the water. Number 3. A person can easily float on dash. Number 4. Dandi March took place in the year dash. Fifth one. The seawater is collected in dash buds dug in the sand. Okay, students. Today's class is over. Thank you all. See you again. Bye.